Thomas walked into the med unit of the ship he had recently joined. They wanted to do a general evaluation, basically a routine checkup. Thomas readied a small folder in his bag for when the inevitable happened. Thomas, please have a seat. Pliskin, a large lion-looking humanoid, said, gesturing to a seat in his examination room. I'll just change the settings to human, and we can begin, he said, baring his teeth in what Thomas assumed was an approximation of a human smile. Sure thing, I've got a file with my medical history explained, Thomas explained as he reached into his bag to retrieve the bundle of documents, only to stop when Pliskin held up a claw to stop him. That won't be necessary. This scanner can identify issues even your primitive race can't identify, Pliskin said with another attempt at a smile. Thomas just held his tongue. It was still a prevalent opinion held amongst the Alliance members that humans weren't worth the oxygen scrubbers used. Okay, hold still and don't panic. They are just shiny lights, Pliskin said with a tone doctors reserve for infants. Thomas resisted the urge to rebuff his insulting attitude. The machine shot out several visible lights as it began to sweep his body, obviously scanning him. This was something Thomas struggled to understand. It seemed more like a movie to make the beams visible with various tools. Human doctors could do that without needing to be so showy. He half suspected that was why they used this. Make a big song and dance about it to primitive races. Okay, the scan is complete, Pliskin said as the display he was holding pinged and began to whir with the results. So healthy as a horse, eh, Doc? Thomas said, repressing a smile, knowing half of what must be showing. Most amusing at this moment was the big lionman somehow was going deathly pale. So many diseases, he muttered as he thought he stealthily moved out of Thomas's reach. Knew it. I'm the healthiest one here, Thomas grinned, standing and approaching the now scrambling lion man. Stay back, Pliskin near squealed in terror. Okay, so tell me, Doc, what's your scanner say? Thomas asked, focusing his gaze on the now cornered doctor. You have traces of countless viruses and diseases. If I didn't know your race was so primitive, I'd suggest you were a biological weapon, Pliskin said, looking back at Thomas. Oh? Which ones? Thomas asked curiously. Pliskin only flicked his display onto the larger screen. Reading through it, Thomas couldn't see where the fear-inducing ones were. I only see the usual stuff and the remnants of vaccines, Thomas said, giving the list a read. Usual stuff? Pliskin repeated in a higher octave. Yeah, chickenpox, common cold, a tetanus shot here and the usual childhood vaccines, Thomas explained, pointing to each corresponding disease. These are common illnesses? Pliskin said in growing shock. Yes, back where I'm from, there are a lot of worse ones, Thomas said with a shrug as he reached to retrieve his medical history bundle. Okay, what about these genetic anomalies? Pliskin asked as he flicked a new list onto the screen. Pausing his retrieval, Thomas walked up to the display. One moment, Thomas said as he took out his glasses and put them on to read the smaller script clearer. Well, this one is bad eyesight. Got that from my mum's side of the family, he said, pointing to one item. Ah, that one isn't fun, he said, pointing to another. What does it do? Pliskin asked in what was quickly becoming morbid fascination. Leaves me in agony most of the day, Thomas said with a shrug. Agony? Pliskin repeated, confused. Lots of pain, but, meh. Thomas finished with a shrug. You have a medical condition that leaves you in constant pain, and you seem apathetic? Pliskin asked, trying to get some handle on this anomaly his years of medical experience could not prepare him for. Genetic condition. Not much can be done but endure it, Thomas replied with another shrug as he continued reading the list. Pliskin, though, had a look about him that suggested he suspected the human to be exaggerating. After all, humans were from a backwater primitive world. Holding out a headband, he offered it to Thomas. This is a sensory unifier band. It'll allow me to experience your issues myself. It'll allow me to identify specific ailments, Pliskin said as he near threw the band at Thomas, not wanting to get near him still. Huh? Oh, sure, Thomas agreed, putting it on his head. Pliskin placed his own band on his head so he could experience the sensations of Thomas. Thomas watched this all unfold and began to panic as he shouted for a nurse to help. The moment he activated the device, Pliskin started screaming before his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed unconscious. After a few minutes and hasty use of smelling salts, Pliskin awoke and looked even more terrified. "You endure that much? That could kill any other race!" Pliskin roared, very much resembling his corresponding earthly species. "Well, you get used to it," Thomas shrugged, not really understanding the issue. A few aches and pains, and having an early onset of arthritis wasn't fun, but it wasn't much to cry about. "Doctor, did you not read the pamphlet for humans?" the rather frustrated nurse asked. Pliskin just mumbled something before meeting the baleful glare of the nurse. "I skimmed the cover," he finally admitted. "They are primitives, so it couldn't be that relevant," he added defensively. "Sir, humans are from a Class 4 death world," the nurse explained. Thomas, watching this, had learnt something new and very metal. He would have to spread the word on his death metal band comms boards. But that means he could out-survive everyone on this ship, Pliskin screeched, pointing at Thomas, who seemed mystified. "That is the case, sir. He was told just to give you his medical records and get your rubber stamp. Did you not read the memo?" the nurse asked pointedly at Pliskin. To drive the final nail in, Thomas took out the bundle of documents he had been asked to provide and gave a toothy grin of his own,